Okay, are you going to say any introductory words, Rebecca, or are we just going to dig in?
I can do a quick intro. So we're the Graduate Student Association. So I'm the president, Rebecca White, and we've been really enjoying hosting this workshop series this semester. They're all recorded on our website and you can go find them there. We have one more coming up next week. So next week is on Wednesday at 6, and it is interviewing skills. So yeah, please come to that one if you can.
A perfect follow-up to today.
Right? Yeah, so we had resume building, CV building, and interviewing. So really a powerhouse workshop series, I think. So yeah, that's about it. So you can take it away.
Okay. I'm Dr. Karen Kuralt. I'm the Interim Associate Dean of the Graduate School. I also teach in the MA program in Professional and Technical Writing. And today I want to talk to you guys about CV building and about the academic job hunt in general, because CVs are mainly for academic job hunts for you to get positions in higher education, either in teaching or in research. So actually, I would like to have each of the three of you who are with me today introduce yourselves briefly and tell what program you're in, and are you job hunting now, or how soon are you going to be job hunting? Because that will actually be very relevant to our discussion today.
I can go ahead and start.
Yeah,
I'm a PhD candidate in the Applied Bioscience program, and I'm hoping to be job hunting around this time next year. So we'll see how that goes.
Cool. So are you taking some time between when you finish the degree and when you start your job hunt?
I think I probably will. So I might actually be job hunting next fall. So
I do think it's smart to leave yourself time to do it. I think it is very difficult to be trying to complete your dissertation requirements, and because the job hunt itself is almost a full-time job.
That's a good point. That's something I had not considered.
And part of that is just because of the volume. So where are you looking to apply?
I'm mostly looking at Texas schools right now, because that's kind of where I'm wanting to be, where I want to move to.
Right.
So,
well, that at least limits it. When I went out on the job market, I was actually willing to go just about anywhere with only a couple of exceptions. And so I was literally applying to anything I was remotely qualified for. And that was great because it gave me lots of options to pick from, but it was also then time consuming, because just even like mailing out the documents, this was remembered well before there was like Google Drive or, I mean, there was email, but most places still wanted you to snail mail your stuff at that point. So it was exhausting. Shanta, what about you?
Hey, I am Shantae.
Shantae, gotcha.
Yes, I am currently a social work major. I'm a graduate student, and I am employed. I'm employed as a mental health associate at the Bridgeway.
Yeah.
And I actually just accepted this job maybe a week or two ago.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you. So yeah, I'm hoping to just, learn a little bit about setting up a CV. I did a separate resume workshop with, I forgot whom, but it was with UALR.
Mm-hmm.
So I did miss you guys' resume workshop, but I'm here for the CV, and hopefully I can attend the interviewing skills one as well, because I'm sure that one will be helpful too.
Sweet. Okay, thanks. That information is very helpful. Seth, what about you?
Hello, I am Seth Cook, and I am a biology major in the master's program. And right now, I'm sort of at the point where it's crunch time to finish up my thesis work.
Mm-hmm.
And so hopefully I'll be completely finished by next spring, but I'm really shooting for this December to be graduating. As far as job hunting goes, it's a little difficult because I don't want to apply somewhere and just be able to tell them that I've got my bachelor's. I want to be able to tell them that I have my master's. And
Right.
some positions are, they say you can apply if you're graduating within the next year or something.
Mm-hmm.
So, but as far as what I'm looking for, I have a sick parent, And so I kind of need to stay close to home, and it's hard enough on them as it is to get back and forth from Magnolia to Little Rock. It's
Oh,
about two and a
yeah.
half hours. And so I'm probably going to stay in the Arkansas or Texas areas.
Okay, that makes good sense. And yes, what you said about being able to apply, within a year of graduation is exactly right. And in fact, you should not let that stop you from applying because, first of all, you don't know when your dream job is going to show up. And so, Shantae, that applies to you, even though you just took this position. Like, there is never wrong to be kind of keeping an eye out on the market just to see what else is out there. Because you never know when a better position might come along for you. And when those opportunities come, you need to jump on them. If any of you are watching this workshop after it was recorded, know that even if you, like, let's say you apply early and you're not quite through your degree requirements, you can always get a letter from your graduate coordinator, or if the employer requires it, the graduate school, stating when you are expected to complete your degree requirements. So even though it is not posted to your transcript yet, if they want some proof that you're getting close, that's not something that we have a problem with. And most employers will take those letters. So always be searching for jobs. And even if you're not on the market yet, it is still not too early for you to be looking at job ads, because I can tell you about how to format a CV. I can tell you about the kinds of content that search committees are looking for in CVs, but what committees are looking for varies from discipline to discipline. So there is no substitute for you actually going out and reading the job ads that are currently out there now, because chances are they will be similar to the ones that will be out when you go on the job market. They are the measure by which you figure out what kinds of experience you ought to be collecting for your CVs. So I even recommend to grad students that they start this process from the moment they enter their graduate program, because that's when you have the time to make changes in the coursework that you're taking, or to seek out certain kinds of publication opportunities or conferences to attend, or professional experiences that you want to get. If you wait until the very end of your program, then the terrible thing is you're stuck with whatever credentials you've got. You don't have any more time to shape your credentials. And then you're in the tough position of just making the best of what you have and hoping it's the right stuff. So that part I can't help you with. You have to figure out what they're looking for. Now, what I bring to this particular workshop is that I have been on many, many academic search committees. I know the kinds of conversations that search committee members are having. And by the way, just in case you're really new to the whole concept of the academic job hunt, let me talk a little bit about some of the ways in which it's different from searching for jobs outside the academy. So first of all is where you look. So as you know, that like in the quote unquote real world, job ads can be posted in multiple places. They could be on people's websites. They could be on job search engines. They could be on, in newspapers. They could be in or disciplinary publications. There's any number of places they could be. That's true in academia, but to a slightly lesser extent. So again, a really good conversation for you to have with some professor in your department early on is to ask them, where are the job ads for your discipline posted? In my discipline, we have listservs where basically everybody in our field knows that everybody who's looking for a job is on those listservs. And so you don't have to go hunting all over the freaking internet to find your positions. You subscribe to the 1 or 2 listservs that everybody's going to post their job ad to. And then you know that you're getting almost all of the really good opportunities that are out there. Again, I can't help you with that because where they are for your discipline may vary. But that does make it a little bit easier so that when you're in job hunting mode, you can kind of hook yourselves up with one of those email lists or one of those, central websites and see all the stuff that's getting offered out there. The second thing that's kind of different is, so in the real world, often one person may be responsible for hiring, or there may be a situation where like HR screens people and then you go to a hiring manager and they do the interviews and the final process. In academia, it's almost always a committee of people. So yes, your CV and your cover letter and your job application materials will initially go to HR. However, HR, as long as you followed the instructions in the job ad of what, well, actually they'll pass them on even if you didn't, but okay, so key things about HR. Number one, they're going to ask you screening questions as part of this process. So there's going to be the job ad, and the job ad will tell you stuff to include. And then HR is going to ask you some screening questions when you upload those materials. You should answer yes to those questions, even if you like have like a niggling little doubt about whether or not like it's yes, but, or yes, sort of. Don't answer no, answer yes, and make the hiring committee knock you out. Because if you answer no to a screening question, they will knock you out, even if you would otherwise be qualified. So you're all worried about, oh my God, am I going to be telling a lie on a job application? The real thing for you to be worried about is, are you going to be cutting yourself out of a job that you actually are qualified for if you can get people to look at your CV? Well, be aware that if HR knocks you out before then, they never get to see your CV, and all the work that you put into putting those application materials together is no good. Okay, so then let's say you get past the screening questionnaire. Then the second most important thing is make sure that you really did include everything that they asked for. Check and double check before you click submit on that thing, or find out if you can make additions afterwards, because a lot of people don't realize how competitive the academic job market is. Even for a not tenure track position in my department, rhetoric and writing, even just for an instructor level position where the minimum qualification we were looking for was a master's degree, we routinely had 50 plus applications for every single ad that we put out. Now, first of all, let me ask those of you who are here on the call with me, if we have 50 plus applications, how many of those do you think we're going to interview?
Maybe
5.
about
Okay, Seth says 5. What do you say, Shantae?
6.
Okay, what do you say, Rebecca?
My guess was also 5.
Okay, we actually will interview 10. So yay, we'll interview, a fifth of the people who actually apply to the thing. You guys were thinking it was going to be 90% attrition off the bat. Now, different departments, again, will have different things. So just because my department happens to like to interview lots of people, that doesn't mean that all departments are that way. But understand that the purpose of your job application materials is to try to get you to that interview phase. That is their one and only job. It's not a situation like in some other positions where people just look to see, do you have the credentials? And if you have the credentials, you get a position. You have to be, to get the position, you have to be the very best applicant that is left in the pool, which we'll talk about that in a moment, at the end of the search. And before you can get to that stage, right, you have to make it past the winnowing out stage. Well, the number one thing that people use to winnow out stuff to say, who are we not going to waste our time on, is who doesn't submit all the materials we requested. So materials that are typically requested: cover letter, CV, often, if you're doing teaching positions, a statement of teaching philosophy. If you're doing a research position, you may be asked for a research agenda. You may be asked for writing samples. You may be asked for a statement on diversity. You need to give them whatever they ask for. Leave off even one of them, and that could be enough by itself, even if you're perfectly qualified, to knock you out, because they're looking for reasons to knock you out. They're trying to figure out who wants this enough to be paying attention to detail. And if they don't want it enough to be paying attention to detail, do we really want to bother with them? And they don't, because they've got tons of people they can pick from. So they could pick anybody. So that's the very first thing that that you want to be aware of. And then the next thing is realizing that even if you write the very best materials, the main thing that's going to do is get you in that either top 10 to 20% that is going to get interviewed. And then your interview needs to sell it. And be aware, and that's why I said it's so important that the interview workshop is coming up next, because there could be multiple rounds of interviews. So frequently these days, particularly now that Zoom has become such an accepted technology, the first round will be Zoom interviews. And we'll see, you know, kind of how you present yourself to camera, you know, how, you know, what kinds of vibes do we get from you that way? And I've seen really good candidates who like gave horrible Zoom interviews and it got them knocked out, where it was like, just because they put their camera in a stupid place, or because they didn't realize they weren't making eye contact, or they didn't realize that the camera angle wasn't flattering. I hope they talk to you about these things during the interviewing workshop, because even little stuff like that can make the search committee not connect with you. And that can be enough for you not to get the position. So, I mean, there's so many little things. And by the way, I don't mean to be discouraging necessarily about the fact that it's all these little things that can lead to you getting the job or not. It's partly that I want you to have realistic expectations and to understand that some of it is just totally beyond your control, right? Some of it is for stupid stuff. So I see sometimes people who go through the job process and they don't get picked, and then they beat themselves up terribly. And they don't understand, you know, they think their degree has failed them. They think they're not a good candidate in some way. And it isn't true. It's just that somebody did it better. And it's so hard to be that last person standing in the search at the end of it. So any feedback you can get from attending workshops like these, practicing with friends, like all of those things are super important to your success. And with the Zoom stuff, there's almost like no excuse not to, because at a minimum, set up an open meeting that's empty and look at your stuff before you connect to the call. Look at like what's behind you in the background, or pay attention to what filter you're using, pay attention to your lighting, pay attention to where your camera is. All of those things are going to congeal to make an impression. And then after that, after the round of Zoom interviews, then the next thing is they'll typically invite 3-ish people to campus, maybe only 2, depending on how their budget is. But like we try to invite 3 whenever we possibly can, which is why we like to interview lots of people, is because first of all, it's fun to interview people. Like I love meeting new people and thinking about like what different ones could offer our department. But second of all, like if you can only bring 2 or 3, man, you want to make sure that like it's the best 2 or 3. So the other thing to keep in mind as all of this is going on, as you're moving from stage to stage, is you may not get any contact from the search committee when you've been moved out of contention. And there's a reason for this. Number one is if I dismiss you from the search, then I can't, then if somebody else drops out that we invited and we decide we'd like to invite you as a replacement, we can't if we moved you out. So as long as I don't say anything to HR and kind of leave you in limbo, then until we make a job offer and until that offer is accepted, you're still a candidate. We could still possibly come back and hire you. Now it's frustrating to you though, right? Because you could be really like we could have 50 and we could be talking to our 10, and it won't be until we invite the people to campus that we dismiss the lower people, like when we feel like we've got a pool that somebody's going to accept. And then if you're in the finalists, like if you're in the 10 we interview, we may not talk to the 7 we don't bring to campus for the whole time that we're bringing people to campus. And they're like, oh, you know, are they ever going to get back to me? But I've also seen it happen, right? That like, in fact, in the stuff that I'm going to show you today, I'm actually going to show you some stuff that I've anonymized from a real search that took place over 5 years ago in our department. And in this search, I'm going to show you the 5 finalists and 2 of them dropped out. So 2 people who thought they were out of the running because we didn't get back to them after the Zoom round ended up coming back in and being 2 of the finalists. So we always want to leave those options open, and you're going to be always like, can I please email them and ask, like, did they like me? Is there any interest? Is there hope? And I'm like, do not email us. Do not. Your job is to zip it, tie your hands up so you don't send us emails, be quiet, and hope we're coming back to you. It's not considered good etiquette for you to ask the search committee, and they couldn't tell you even if you do. So then we feel bad because you're emailing us and we're ignoring your emails. Any questions about those basic things? Because I mean, none of that has to do with the CV, but I think it's really helpful for you to have realistic expectations of how far can the CV get you and what role does it play in this process.
Once you have like made an offer and they accept, do you then go back and tell the other candidates?
Yes.
Okay.
But usually, and here's the thing that's kind of heartbreaking. Usually it's HR that tells them. So that always feels kind of icky to us as the search committee too, is like, so you start to, by the end of this process, feel like you've gotten to know these people, and often you feel friendly toward them, and HR encourages you not to have a lot of personal contact. So you don't ever get back together with your rejected candidates and say, oh, well, here's why we made the offer to this person, or here, and again, you're just like, I thought they liked me. And they did probably like you. They probably really liked you. In fact, I have to say there have been multiple searches that I've been on where at the end of the search, we have gone to the dean and begged the dean, can we please have 2 of these people? Can we please? And they're just like, nope, it's always budget. So they could really love you, and you could still have kind of a curt and weird ending to that process. And again, you should not take that in any way personally. And a good story about that is, so I had that experience with one of the places that I interviewed with when I was brand new on the market. And I went up there and I felt like we had good chemistry and we got along great, but I was ABD, and I know they had people who were finished in their search. And that almost certainly is why, one of them got the job instead of me. But the great thing is so like in academia in particular, goodbye is never goodbye forever. So first of all, you're going to see these people at conferences, and you want to make sure that you continue a good and cordial relationship, because you never know when you guys are going to be on a grant together next, or when you guys are going to be serving on a committee together, for the discipline at some point. And so the great thing is so even though Wisconsin Stout turned me down, every time I saw them at conferences after that, they were always so happy to see me. And we were always like, kind of the best of buds. And they were like, man, you could have been us if only, and we would have loved you. We would have thought that was great. And so I always still kind of think fondly of them, because they're my school that almost was. So, but the other thing is too, you never know when another position at that place is going to come open. And so that's another thing that I would encourage you to think about, is that, again, just because they turn you down for that search does not mean that they don't want to see you come again. So you should never take that as, oh, well, I shouldn't apply to that university again because they already said they didn't want me in the first place. That is not true. Frequently, we very much want to see you again. So apply, unless you got a weird vibe from them and you think you don't want to work for them, apply again. Sometimes people who apply more than once actually end up there. Great question. Other questions before we start looking at some examples?
You answered my second question with that last little blurb, so
about the whether to
reapply. Yeah.
Yep. And some weird stuff happens in academia. So sometimes it can be the very position you applied for. Like, for whatever reason, that person gets in the position and doesn't like it and they leave after a year. Or, well, I'll tell you a story in this about, we had an applicant who was flaky, and we felt burned by him, but we should have expected it because he had done it to us before. So why we didn't think it was going to happen again, we don't know. But But that led to us, literally posting the same job ad a year later. And you're going to be like, wow, did they hate us all so much that they couldn't hire somebody for that position? And it's like, no, it's probably that they made an offer and then something bad happened. And you don't know if it was from the applicant that they made the offer to, or if it was something budgetary at the institution. But again, all of this stuff has nothing to do with you personally. So you be true to the things that you really want, be your very best self in these interviews and in your job materials, and have faith that the right position will open for you at the right time. And don't let any of it get you down or make you feel like you're not qualified or not wanted or not good enough, because you are. It's just a really hard game. So, and to give you some context for that, so when I went out on the job market for the first time, I was applying nationally. I was willing to go almost anywhere. And so I applied to 42 places, I think, and I got 10 first round interviews. And out of the 10 first round interviews, I was a finalist for 6 of them. So I got to go to 6 campus visits. And at the end of the process, I had 4 job offers. But you realize that, like, from the 42 to the 4, that's a 90% attrition rate of how many applications I put out to how many job offers I had at the end. Now, but it was great having 4 job offers, because then I could kind of pick the one that, I had plenty to compare for. I didn't feel like I was trapped into, like, I only have one offer and that's the place I've got to go. But then I didn't stay at my first place for I didn't even make it through 2 years before I started looking to go somewhere else. So, which was here. And then I stayed here like forever. But yeah, that's how that works. It's crazy making. It will definitely make you wonder about your sanity at some point, but hang in there, because it can totally pay off too. Okay, any other questions before we move on into taking a look at actual materials? Okay, so I'm going to share with you let me get it up first, a sample ad based on the ad that we ran more than 5 years ago. Do that. So let's talk a little bit about the structure of job ads and what you should be paying attention to when you're getting ready to send your CV and your cover letter someplace. Okay, so here's an example of an ad, and let me make it a little bit bigger. Zoom control. There we go. Okay. So one of the weird things about ads is that, of course, pieces of them are things the department actually wrote, and pieces of them are things the university told us to put in there. So it'll always start out something like, whatever department at some university invites applications for, and then it's literally just the job description. So now notice how broad we wrote this. To teach composition with opportunities to teach undergraduate courses in nonfiction, persuasion, editing, and business/technical writing. Minimum qualifications, an MA or higher in rhetoric and composition, technical writing, English, or a closely related field, and a minimum of 2 years college teaching experience. Preferred qualifications, a candidate's application will be enhanced by interest and experience in writing center administration and practice, online teaching, teaching with technology, and knowledge of composition theory. Knowledge in technical/business writing, editing, persuasion, and nonfiction writing is also preferred. Okay, let's stop there for a moment and let me ask you, do you think that from this job ad, we expected that our candidates would have all those things? Okay, why not, Rebecca?
Because it just seems unlikely that one person would have all of those things.
That is correct. Yes. So why do you think we wrote the ad so broadly if we don't expect that somebody is going to have all the things?
Catch a wide variety of people.
That's right.
Yes.
That's right. We're looking for a full-time, non-tenure track instructor, and we don't want HR to tell us we can't have someone we want. So we've written the ad almost like a fishing net, right? To like, there are so many things that we could possibly use. Now, interestingly, we're tipping our hand a little bit by saying a candidate's application will be enhanced by interest and experience in writing center administration and practice. And notice that's the first thing we listed, because secretly, we're hoping that we're going to get somebody to replace the writing center director. So she was getting ready to retire at that point, and we didn't want to turn away somebody who we might like who didn't have writing center experience. But secretly, the stuff we're putting closer to the front is the stuff we really are hoping you're going to say to us. This is true of just about all places. So you should pay very close attention to what order they put the preferred qualifications into. But at the same time, understand that this is not saying you need to eliminate yourself for not having the preferred qualifications. If you've got one of them, or even if you just meet the minimum, go ahead and apply anyway. You know, when people are writing that broadly, they're doing it so that they can get to interview as many people as interest them as possible. And again, we're just like a happy-go-lucky little department that wants to interview all the people. So, so we put everything in that we possibly could. So then after this, almost all of the rest of this is boilerplate. So every job ad that we put out says that candidates are expected to demonstrate a respect for diversity and a commitment to student retention and success. But do take that stuff seriously, because the fact that it's in the ad means we are almost certainly going to ask you a question about it. And the answer is not that you don't do those things, which you would think nobody would do that, right? But I had one of our own students where I was just like, where seriously in the Zoom interview, he told us that he doesn't really plan anything with regard to diversity in his classes. And we're like, dude, you just literally, like, there's no way we're asking you to a campus visit now. That is not the right answer. So be prepared for that stuff. And if possible, again, talk to folks in your departments about good examples of ways to answer that question and ways to write about it in your job material so that you're not caught by surprise. And this stuff is just literally describing the department. It's important though, because when you submit your cover letter, which a lot of people overlook, we actually are going to spend a little time today talking about cover letters, because a lot of people blow them off, and that also costs them getting into the interview as much or more as the CV. So you want to show not just that you want a paycheck, but that you want to work for this specific place. So would I expect to see some reference in the cover letters to characteristics of our program? Yes, because I want to know why you want to come here instead of all the other places that are advertising positions. And I understand you want a paycheck, but you still need to make an argument for why you would be a good fit with us. Okay, then all of this stuff is boilerplate. So this part of this paragraph is always important because it tells you what has to be included. This is the list where if you leave something off, you could get knocked out. Then this is, boilerplate stuff about what the university values. Again, yes, it's boilerplate. Yes, they make everybody stick it in, but are we going to ask you questions about it? Almost certainly. So make sure you're ready. And then here's stuff about the HR, and then this is all the legal stuff. All right. So every single paragraph in this job ad has a purpose, and showing that you have paid attention to what they're asking for, what they say about themselves, and the values that they highlight in the letter is another really important part of getting out of the stack of applications and into the interview pool, which is what you want to do. Any questions about that? Okay. All right, so let's see, there's some general things you can do once you beyond the job ad to kind of give yourself some advantages. Number one is to talk to your advisors and find out if either they or any of their friends have ever worked for this university, because just even that little bit of extra knowledge can again make it sound like you're going to be their friend because you know these things about them. And they almost, like, you would think they would be cynical and jaded about this stuff by now, but they almost always respond with, oh my God, they read our website. That's so wonderful. Or, oh my gosh, they know this other person who was here. And isn't that just great? And I won't lie, those connections can play a big, again, that can be the differentiating factor between somebody who has very similar credentials to you. And right, that's the hardest thing about the CVs, right? Is that if these people meet the minimum qualifications and you also meet the minimum qualifications, then what's going to give you the edge over that person? It's the personalization and the connections almost every time. Having those extras that they like. So you know that for academic ads, you're really for positions, you're really looking at having expertise in 3 big areas, right? Research, teaching, and service, okay? And research and teaching get the most emphasis because those are usually considered the biggest parts of the job. And it is important that you pay attention to those 2 things in the job ad because, for example, if you're applying to an institution that values research 1, you know, like it's their top priority, then you need to make that the thing you emphasize the most. So you put more of the research toward the top of the CV, you talk about it in more detail in the cover letter, you show them, yes, I know you value research. Conversely, if you go to a place where mostly what they do is teaching and the research requirement is much less, then you better emphasize teaching. You mirror back to them always what their values are, because here's the danger. If you apply to a research institution and you talk mostly about your teaching, they're going to be like, oh, does this person not have a research agenda? Are they not going to publish? And what they're looking for in you is they're hoping that you're going to basically bring glory to their institution, that they're going to be able to brag about you and say, hey, this person brought in X number of dollars in grants and look at these publications that they got and they won these awards. And if that's what they value and they don't see the potential for that in your job application materials, that can also get you knocked out. Same thing happens with the teaching institution. If you're applying to a teaching institution and all you do is you talk about your research, they're going to be like, oh, I bet they're not going to be happy here because like, we just don't, you know, we are very student focused and we have much heavier teaching loads than other places. And so then they'll worry that you're so focused on your research that you're not going to stay. And that's a big, believe me, that is one of the biggest conversations that search committees are having, because search committee is a huge time commitment. When we do it, it takes us a lot of time, and there's nothing we hate more than we get to the end of the process and then the person stays for a year and then they go. So we're all, and this, we, even when it isn't appropriate, like we're asking, you know, now, why does this person want to move to Arkansas? You know, and so if you answer those questions in your cover letter up front, for example, like, why do you want to move to Arkansas? And it had better be something to do with like, you like the community or you know, although I did see this go horribly wrong one time. I was in a search committee where we were looking to hire a chair of the department. And this guy writes in his cover letter, says, you know, my wife and I have always fantasized about retiring to the Ozarks. And so, you know, I thought it would be great to come and chair your department for a couple of years and then retire to the Ozarks. And we were like, he's out. Because then it was really clear that like he wasn't even that interested in the department. You know, he was already looking at his retirement and we hadn't even hired him yet. So you have to negotiate that carefully. But yeah, there's a huge amount of skepticism on our part about like, you know, salary's not going to be as high here. And, you know, it's far away from, you know, like if you get city people and they're applying to Arkansas, you're like, are you really going to stick around here? Or the question I got asked when I interviewed here was, they asked me, you know, you graduated from 2 really large universities, you know, the biggest university in Utah, and then you went to a Big Ten school at Purdue. How are you going to feel about a metropolitan university that doesn't have a football team. They were thinking about like all the Greek system, the huge athletic stuff. They thought I might be happier at some place like Fayetteville. And then I explained to them all the reasons that I actually was excited to get away from all of those things. Like it wasn't fun actually being at institutions where the football team ran everything and where you were expected to cut athletes' breaks because they were the stars and they were bringing all the attention to the university. Or how much it sucked teaching freshman composition at 8 a.m. during rush week when the fraternity people were all hungover and could barely scrape their butts to class, much less do their assignments. And I said, look, the thing that's exciting about UALR is you've got people who are here because this is where they want to be. This is where they're committed to be, and they have families, and they know that education is the next step for them. And it's not just something mommy and daddy are paying for, or that coach tells them they have to go to class. And they were like, dang, okay, I guess maybe you do belong here. So yeah, anticipate those kinds of questions. And then the service thing is like one of the things you can use to get extra. So for example, for Seth and Rebecca, because you're both so involved in GSA, you guys have a beginning of a glimpse into what the service life of a professor is like. You know a little bit about the committee work that we do. You understand a little bit about university governance. That can give you an edge over other candidates, because that's the part that nobody prepares you, talks to you about explicitly in graduate school. And yet when you get into those positions, it's a huge part of your being able to make an impact at the university. So the fact that you guys already know a little bit about that will help you tremendously. And that's why for any of you watching this after the recording, I strongly encourage you, if you have not done so already, and if this kind of work interests you, to get involved with GSA, because of the opportunities for you to get that service experience that could pay off and could give you an edge over another candidate. So then the other things that can give you an edge is your technology experience. I think there's an assumption that the younger generation is more technology savvy, but it isn't always true. So the fact that you can incorporate technologies in a effective way into your teaching and research is important. Your ability to talk about things like diversity, equity, and inclusion is important. Your ability to talk about assessment is important. So not just, having fun in the classroom, but actually being able to tell whether or not your teaching strategies work. And then of course, post-pandemic online teaching is a huge advantage if you've got it. And so if you're early in your CV building career and you don't yet have those things, seek out classes and opportunities that will let you pick some of those up. Because again, that can be the little thing where they're like, ooh, that's special. Those other people don't have that. How great would it be to hire that? And you would be thinking like, well, everybody, is familiar with teaching online now, but there's still a lot of people who either are familiar with it and hate it, or they're familiar with it and they're not good at it. So again, if you have that as an option, that gives you an advantage. Okay, any questions about that? All right, so having said all that, the actual construction of the CV itself is like one of the least interesting things that there is, because CVs are just literally for showing that you meet the requirements of the job ad, nothing more, nothing less. And the good news, I guess, about this for CV writing is the committees, to be honest, do not care that much about the formatting. I mean, I personally am more offended by the formatting because I teach document design and I'm like, man, that was a terrible typeface. Why would anybody choose that? Or look at how unbalanced their margins are. And I'm like, that's not even professional. But man, I have seen the crappiest looking CVs get jobs. And that's because if there's one thing I can say about academics as readers is they have a high tolerance for boredom. So they're not looking for anything fancy or outrageous. Well, you can tell, right? All you have to do is look at journal publications, right? Have you ever seen anything look less interesting to read than a journal publication? It's like they go out of their way to make it look as boring and pedestrian as possible. And in a way, that is exactly what they're doing. There's a certain pride. It's almost like, you know, if you made it look too pretty, maybe you're not really serious. So yay, they will forgive you terrible typefaces, unattractive layouts, and I'll show you here. I'm not kidding. You know, as long as you show them they've got the credentials. And you can make their job easier by making it easy for them to find the stuff they're looking for. Because here's the challenge of the CV versus the resume. So resumes, you know, right, are short. You know, the name means summary. So they're not all inclusive. They are the highlights. They are just the essential things. 1 or 2 pages is typically the rule for a resume for your first career position. CVs are allowed to be as many pages as they want to be, for good or for bad. So you're going to see in the CVs I'm about to show you stuff that was as short as 3 pages to as long as I think 20 something. And you would say, well, people would look badly on somebody submitting a 20 something page thing. No, they would not. No, in fact, they would be even more impressed by the fact that you could have 20 pages worth of stuff. So you don't have to edit yourself as much, but what you do have to do is make it possible for them to find that you have the credentials that they asked for in the ad. All right, this is a good time for us to actually look at some concrete examples so you can see what I'm talking about here. Let me get them in the right place. Let's look at CVs first. Okay, so this first CV I'm going to show you is actually the CV that got the job that I just showed you the ad for. Okay, so you notice it's got the standard kind of resume type of letterhead, name is up in the corner, contact information, etc. And then notice that he starts out with his education. That's pretty typical. You always do it in reverse chronological order, usually from your highest degree to your lowest degree. Then he goes with his teaching stuff, which is good because that shows he knows well. And you could see it in our job ad. Did we say anything about research in our job ad? We did not. So he knows he should lead with his teaching stuff because that's what we talked about the most. So here comes teaching, here comes more teaching. And notice too, like, so he groups it into things that we can see what kinds of teaching he did. So he taught for 2 different places. At one of them, he taught mostly the kinds of freshman writing courses we talked about. Then in another one, he taught those, and he taught a couple of higher things. So that makes us happy. Here's other teaching experiences at places other than the place he did his MA and his PhD. That's nice. Look, he's got some urban experience. So that's going to fit in well with our metropolitan university. He's got some writing center experience, and look, it's at the top of his second page. So we're not even too far in and we already hit some writing center stuff. And then he puts in his administrative experience, which is a form of service. And then his internships. So he's got some professional writing experience, which is one of the things we asked for. Then notice, because he's fresh out of his PhD, doesn't have a whole lot in the way of publications. We don't care because we're not going to ask him to publish anyway. We see he's got some conference presentations. That makes us happy because he's at least staying up to date in the field and being active. He's got professional development workshops. Then he's got some more random service stuff, invited presentations, awards, relevant coursework from the places he's done his degrees, professional memberships, and then his references, and that's the end. Now, notice some things about this. So it helps that he's got headings that stand out clearly, and he's got some white space going between these sections, so his sections pop out. Do we care about what order he talks about them? No, because he did the stuff that was right at the beginning. So he talked about his teaching mainly, and he talked about his writing center stuff, and the rest of it is all just kind of like, it's comprehensive. So you put it all in and we don't really care as long as we see it clearly labeled. I don't love, for example, the fact that he ran all this stuff together and like, look, there's a typo in teacher's workshop and stuff like that. Did any of that keep us from offering him the job? It sure did not. Like, look at this, like this isn't even in the right place. Like it's not aligned right. Did we care? We did not. We didn't care about any of this stuff. All we cared about is, and it helped, he also knew us from his master's degree. So that was another reason we were attracted to him, because he knew exactly what UALR is and what our department is. And so we thought that would make him more likely to stay. The joke was on us. He left us after 2 years and went to Maine. So all that to say, you know, he did a lot of good things right. And it still didn't mean that he stayed. And it still didn't mean, you know, when we still put this position out again just 2 years after he left. So, but this is the basic structure of the CV. Do you want to ask any questions about this CV or anything that I've scrolled through here?
Yeah, so I had a question about the like professional development workshop section.
Right.
What kind of qualifies to go in that section?
Damn near anything you've been in. So like, this is actually a professional development workshop. Did you go to a bunch of GSA workshops? If so, you get to put them on your CV if you want.
Excellent.
Now by, you know, at the same time, do you have to put them on your CV? You don't. So if you feel like they're cluttery and irrelevant, then you don't have to put them. But to be honest with you, nobody cares. Like, if you think that is saying an interesting thing about yourself, which for you it is actually, because you didn't just go to the workshops, you helped organize the workshops, you found speakers for the workshops. And so I think for certain types of institutions, it would serve you well to include them.
Okay, thank you.
Great question. Seth and Shantae, do either of you have any questions?
Not that I can think of right now.
Okay.
My question was more so like, is there a particular like font style that we should use for our CV?
Oh my goodness, no.
Okay.
Now, if I were answering as the document design professor for my department, I would say, yes, there are totally fonts you should not use. But the reality is that in academia, they don't care. They really don't. So we're going to actually look at the other 4 finalists for this position and let you see how much they do not care. But before we look at the actual CVs of those people, I want to show you a side-by-side comparison of some of them, just so you can see in a single handout how differently their organizations can be. Okay, so let me come back and share this. Here we are. Okay. So here are 4 candidates and the order of things that they listed. So notice everybody, almost everybody except for candidate NL, who put an executive summary kind of thing at the beginning of his. Almost everybody started with education. Then 2 of them went to teaching appointments next. This candidate called it academic employment, which is still kind of teaching positions. I don't notice okay, this was strange about candidate NL, that he doesn't get to his teaching until after his honors and awards. So obviously he thinks his honors and awards are very cool because he put them close to the top. We don't care. Again, we're just looking to see, do you have the stuff we were looking for? Notice the candidate DF obviously thought that his industry employment was one of the things that would be most attractive to us. And he put that even before more traditional academic credentials like his publications and his presentations. But what you can see from this is like, so one person, NL, put his honors and awards here, where candidate CJ put the awards almost at the end. Candidate MK put her awards almost at the end. Did any of that matter? Not one bit. So all this handout really shows you is, number one, don't get obsessive about your organization. You organize it in the way that you think best applies to the job ad and best represents yourself, because ultimately you're trying to represent yourself. Be aware, of course, that the attention of the reader is always higher for those first couple of pages, and their eyes start to glaze after about the third page. So anything you put after page 3, we're going to be kind of like, so if there's a credential that you really, really love and you really want us to see it, figure out a way to get it in those first 3 pages where we're still awake. And then all of this is just giving us a picture of who you are, and you can do it in any order that you want. Is that helpful? Any questions about that? Oh, go ahead, Seth. I see your hand.
I just wanted to ask, I've had, awards in the past, or I've had, conferences that I've presented to, but most of that was when I was an undergrad. And so how do you handle like the gap that I'm having, and that I haven't done much of that as a master's student?
Doesn't matter. You still list them. That's the joy of it being a CV, right? A CV, so CV stands for curriculum vitae, which means the course of your life. Literally anything you've done since you entered higher education is fair game. And you don't have to explain, anything. You just list the stuff. And the only reason I wouldn't list the stuff is if you think that it would reflect negatively on you in some way, but I see no way that your activity as an undergrad would reflect negatively on you. So absolutely include it.
All right.
I mean, in a way, like a story that I could tell myself as a search committee member about your undergraduate experience is that, wow, look, he's been so interested in research that he's been doing this since he was an undergrad. He must really know that this is what he wants to do. So, and I can't imagine, I mean, like you said, they could ask a question about why you didn't do more of it as a master's student. If you think that's a serious question that it scares you, that it might disqualify you, then the cover letter is an appropriate place for you to address that.
Okay, and that leads up to another question. I know that whenever you're interviewing, some people recommend that you don't tell your stuff, that you sort of wait for them to ask, and anything that you haven't or if it's listed on your resume or CV specifically, then wait for them to ask. But what would be some examples of something that you would want to address specifically in the cover letter?
Well, so you want to address things that, well, I'll give you the example for, let's kind of switch hats and talk from a grad coordinator perspective. Like if I have somebody applying to my graduate program who had a low undergraduate GPA at some point, like, that's not going to necessarily knock them out, because we have the possibility to conditionally admit somebody as low as a 2.0. But if you don't talk to me about why your GPA is so low below our program minimum, like what happened, and what I want to hear is like, so what did you learn from that experience, and what are you going to do that's going to make it better? If somebody didn't address it, then I would feel like they're avoiding the question. So for this particular case, I wouldn't call attention to the fact that you have a huge gap, but I would make sure and talk specifically about what your research plans are, or what, you know, what your goals are in terms of future conference participation, maybe, so that they know that you're not just like blowing it off.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Regarding what you were saying before about you should not volunteer things that you think are negative during the interview, but do you have to wait for them to ask you a question about a credential that's important to you? No, you don't. Now, let them ask all their questions first, for sure, but you should have kind of a little list, you know, and this is the great thing I love about the Zoom interviews, and I also loved this about phone interviews too, is that I could have all kinds of notes that they couldn't see about things to remind that I wanted to remember to talk about, or things about people on the committee that I had researched that I wanted to be sure and bring up, you know, because I can have like this, see here, I've got a little piece of paper, but I have to almost put it up in front of my eyes for it to even show up on camera. Like I can have it just a little bit lower and you guys don't even know that I'm sitting here looking at my notes, and I could have notes to myself about make sure that I talk about this cool experience or this thing I noticed about their school. And you look super prepared. You know, you don't have to, if they don't ask about it, don't bring it up. If it's in your favor, that's the key thing. Is it in your favor? Any other questions before we look at a couple more CVs? Okay, let me bring up a few more. Let's look at the longest one. Okay, so here's candidate DF. Candidate DF probably would have been our first choice if he had stayed in the search. And if you wonder how much is too much, dude sent us a 24-page CV. Like, look at all, and it's not even pretty. Like, look at how tiny his name was compared to other stuff on the page. Like, it wasn't even any bigger than his level 1 headings. It's not even, like, Arial Black is just not even a modern or attractive font. But we don't care. He lists all this stuff. Here's his PhD, his MS. He has a grad certificate. He has an MA. Scroll, scroll, scroll. Here's his employment history. Here's where he's worked in industry. More industry. Still more industry. So dude, like, we probably should have taken this as a warning too, that this guy could not, like, why does he have this much industry experience for a guy? You know, does it mean that he can't stay anywhere? And the answer to that would have been yes. Especially if we'd like paid attention to, like, look at these dates: 94, August 94 to August 95, September 95 to February 96. He was only there for like 6 months. February 96 to, I'm like, this should have been a warning to us, but did we listen? We did not. More industry stuff. Now his publications. This is probably the part, to be honest with you, that suckered us in, which is that, oh my God, look at the publications. How exciting that he's contributing. Here come his proceedings. More presentations. More presentations. More presentations. So anyway, you get the point. Like, seriously, this is just, we're not even halfway through yet. And it just goes on, and he includes literally every possible thing that he could include. And we knew him also, just like we knew the guy who got the job, and we were very impressed. And he, even though like he was also overqualified for a non-tenure track instructor position, we were still going to offer it to him if he stayed in the search. All right, let's look at another one. Okay, this is probably, oh, I'm not sharing. This is probably the shortest CV that we got. And I actually felt like this candidate maybe didn't show herself to her best ability, which is why she did not ultimately get offered the job. And this, it wasn't just the CV, it was also she had problems in the interview. But like, notice that hers is only 3 pages. And it's relevant. It was relevant enough to get her interviewed, and it was relevant enough to get her invited to campus when one of the, when 2 of the other guys dropped out of the search, but she still didn't ultimately get the job. Notice strangely too that like her education was at the end and that she didn't list any of her coursework. She listed them in the wrong order. But again, it still didn't keep her from getting interviewed. So she made it to the finalist round with that. Let's look at another one. Oops. Come on, little share screen. There we go. All right, this one is 8 pages. Academic background, then the teaching, then the courses. More courses. Her administrative experience. More administrative experience. She's been an outside consultant. That was something that was super attractive, just like the industry experience of the other folks. Her presentations, and I don't know why she chose to do selected presentations. Like once you're someplace permanent and it's kind of like if you're a full professor, for example, and you've had like, 50 presentations or whatever, then maybe you only select a few of them. Although that didn't stop Fisher. Like I said, he went on for 3 pages worth of stuff. Publications, technical reports, her certificates, awards, and grants, professional and community affiliations and memberships, and then her teaching philosophy. And again, she was a finalist, and it really, to be honest, I mean, I think the thing that made the difference for the guy who got the job versus the 2 women who we also brought to campus was that he had his PhD and they both had MAs. So, all right, last one. So as you can see, people, they had different combinations of fonts. They had different approaches to white space. They didn't necessarily put the categories in the same order. So the key thing is that what kinds of categories you're allowed to put, and then you put them in the order that you think shows you the best and that applies best to the job ad. And you might change the order around a little bit depending on what the job ad asks for, so that you can put your most relevant stuff close to the top. Notice these things like professional affiliations, references, and stuff, that almost always goes at the end. All right, that's pretty much everything I want to say to you about CVs. Do you have any questions about the basics? All right, so as we conclude then, I want to talk very briefly about cover letters, because I find that people underestimate the importance of cover letters. In fact, I have a lot of people who say, oh, well, a cover letter, just like nobody's going to read a cover letter. All right, that might be true in some place in like industry, for example. But even then, if they asked you for the cover letter, then you're a fool to waste the opportunity, because the CV is just a list of your credentials. The cover letter is important because it's your first opportunity for them to hear your professional identity. It's the first time for you to make an argument for yourself versus just give them a table of your credentials. So when two candidates are similarly qualified, the tiebreaker goes to the cover letter. And the cover letter can actually be the most important thing, because if again, you sound like you've done your research about the institution and you make a good case for why you're a good fit, then you're going to get the edge over somebody who just kind of blows off the cover letter. And when I say blow off the cover letter, let me show you what I mean. I'll show you actually first from an industry workshop where, again, I encouraged people not to waste the opportunity to write a good cover letter if you get that opportunity. Okay, so here's why cover letters are so important, whether you're in industry or in academia. They let you make a personal connection in a way that your CV and your resume cannot. So they let you explain why you want the job. They let you explain why you're the right person for the job. They let you talk about your soft skills, which are personal qualities that are hard to show on a resume. They demonstrate your communication abilities. So you know, for example, that anybody can say, I am a great communicator. I am a team player. Like, that means nothing. But here, like, if you're a crappy communicator, it's going to show up in your cover letter. So it tells us a lot about your ability to express yourself. Cover letters show your professional personality. They give us a sense of how you're going to communicate with students, for example, or how you're going to communicate with colleagues. And again, as with the CV, the goal of them is to get the reader interested in calling you for an interview. Okay, so, and I make the point here that people want to know what kind of person they're going to be hiring, because ideally they want to keep you for a while. So they want somebody who fits in well with the values and the personality of the organization. And that's something that a cover letter can show that a CV cannot. So I point out to people when they're applying for industry positions that they should always, especially if the employer does a good job of writing their ad so they tip their hand about what kinds of personal qualities they want, always echo back to them the qualities that they talk about in the job ad. But if they don't give you any hints, you can never go wrong with talking about these kinds of things. These are all great stories you can tell about yourself that make them feel like this person has something to offer. This part down here, I talk a little bit about like ways that you can show your connections. So like this one doesn't apply as well to academia, but if you were formerly a student of that place, by all means, bring that up. What do you know about their reputation? Do you like what you know about their reputation? Can you say something about that? Do you know somebody who works there? Definitely mention that. In here where I say, do you like the kind of work that the company does? I would say, do you like the kinds of classes that this university is offering, for example, or do you like something about their research center? These are, again, things that show that you paid attention to them and makes them feel honored and flattered and like you really do want to belong to them. And then here are some quick tips. Number one, please address your cover letter to a real human being, not to whom it may concern. Like when you address it to whom it may concern, that's almost like saying, this is junk mail. That's how, when you get stuff in your mailbox and it says to resident, like you throw that away right away. So don't do that. Find out who the real person is. Or if you absolutely cannot figure out who the chair of the hiring committee is, it would be way better to write Dear Human Resources or Dear Hiring Committee than to whom it may concern, which is the coldest, most impersonal intro you can do. then I recommend that for industry letters that you try to keep your cover letter to a page. Again, with academic cover letters, bless our hearts, we're just little nerds. We will let you go on. You can go 2 to 3 pages single spaced if you want to, and we will still read every single word of that. So that's where it is. It is actually uncommon. So for example, I would give the advice to my MA students applying for non-tenure track in full-time instructor positions. Their cover letter needs to be at least a page. We're not even going to take them seriously if they only write us half a page. That makes us feel like you're not actually that interested, are you? If you're applying for a tenure track position, you better freaking write me a couple of pages, because otherwise I'm going to be wondering, do you have enough qualifications, or do you have enough to say about your work to work here? And again, that sounds obnoxious because you're like, what am I going to say for 2 pages? Well, we'll talk about that in a minute, about some of the things you can say. But it kind of boils down to longer versions of this advice that I give the industry people, which is, in the intro, of course, say the job that you're applying for, where did you hear about it? And then like in that introduction, you want to give them right away why you think they should be excited about you. Why are you the right person for this job? And now talk about why you want to work here. So if you can, this is a place where you can bring up, what is it about this institution or this job description that particularly attracted you, and make the connection to their CV. And this is even more important for academic applicants than it is for industry applicants, because the CV is so big. The danger of the CV being so big and comprehensive is that your best credentials could get buried. So this is the place for you to put right up front, please notice these extremely cool things about me and how they connect to who you guys are. And then what do you have to offer as an employee? What are these cool things that you have? And your short conclusion saying, more details can be found in your CV. You would love to have an interview. Here's how they can contact you. And you may be like, but my contact information is on the CV. Do I really have to put it in the letter too? Yes, yes. But you want it to be as easy as humanly possible for them to contact you. And if they lose one of the documents, it doesn't matter, because you've got your contact information on both of them. Okay, things to make sure you do before you send that cover letter. Please use spell check and grammar check to get rid of the easy mistakes. Again, like poor attention to detail could get you knocked out. Or point 3, better still hand it to a trusted friend and have that person take a look at it. Please print your letter out and read it. You will catch more mistakes if you print it out than if you read it on the screen. And then of course, double check names, numbers, and email addresses, because your spell checker can't help with that. In particular, please check people's names and correct titles. There is nothing worse than, like, I had a professor at the University of Utah whose name was Brooke Hopkins. And he would get, when he was the chair of the department, people would write, "Dear Ms. Hopkins." Well, he was a guy and that didn't make him happy. It isn't rude. It is never rude for you to call their administrative assistant and ask, what is the correct title? What is the correct form of address? What are the correct pronouns? That shows you care. That shows you're actually interested in this place. Nobody is ever going to hold that against you. So always attend to the social niceties. Okay, so let's take a look at what this looks like then in an academic context. All right, again, we'll start with the guy who got the job. Okay, so notice he sticks to 2 pages. That's a good length. Let's see if I can drop it so we can take a big picture look. Okay, so he says, "Dear search committee members," that's fine. At least, it's not to whom it may concern. "I'm writing to apply for the instructor in writing position at University of some state that was advertised, blah, blah, blah. I'm a doctoral candidate in my final year of study at RSU. and will graduate in May 2017. So he's basically establishing that he has the credentials that we asked for. I have experience teaching a variety of courses to diverse student populations in a number of settings, including at our institution. Further experience as a program assistant mentor for TAs complement my pedagogical and research interests. And then he talks briefly about his research interests. I still feel like he could have been more concise in this intro. Like, I feel like he's going to end up repeating some of these points in some of the later stuff. And I would have liked to have him say something that made a more personal connection between him and the program. Like, why does he want this job? But it's not bad. Okay, so then in his second paragraph, notice that again, he's being very smart. He noticed that we did not talk about research in the ad. And so all of this paragraph he devotes to his teaching, which that's great. And that allows him to give us details about what he was doing in those teaching positions that were not as appropriate for the CV. And then he talks about mentoring teaching assistants. This is him knowing that we're looking for a writing center person, because one of the biggest jobs of the writing center director is to mentor grad assistants. So that was smart. So now notice it's not even until he gets to the second page that he starts, and even when he brings his research up, he brings it up in terms of writing program administration. And then he talks about, practical application of his research and concludes with the polite closing. But notice that he talked about all these things in some substance. So these are much larger paragraphs than I would recommend to people who are doing industry cover letters, for example. They make him look serious and well qualified to an academic audience. Any questions about that letter? And welcome, Esther, by the way. We're very glad to have you with us.
Sorry about the being late.
Oh, not at all. We're recording this workshop, so you'll be able to watch the parts that you missed earlier.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Because we're already actually past the CV part, and we're talking just very briefly about cover letters before we conclude tonight.
Okay, great. Thanks.
You're welcome. Okay, so does anybody have any questions about what is effective about this cover letter? Okay, let's take a look at a couple of other examples. All right, let's look at the guy who dropped out of the search. Okay, again, notice 2 pages. It's very, very standard for this type of, oh, you can't see this yet. Hang on. Okay, so here we are. 2 pages. Notice very similar kinds of paragraph lengths. He gave us a link to his portfolio early on, which was nice. He leads off talking about his curriculum development stuff, which shows his teaching awareness. He points out that he has also worked with their writing center. Then he talks about his special things, the extras that we were looking for. So the fact that he's interested in multimodal composing and digital publication looks nice. Then he talks about his experiences with our program. One of the things that I think, and notice that like he's got bullet points about, specifics to remind us about like how good he is with students. I thought that was a particularly nice aspect of his cover letter. And then in particular, like, so here's a case, Seth, that kind of is like yours. So he knew when he was submitting this, because he used to work for us, he left us and went to another university. And of course, we're all sitting around looking at each other like, why does dude want to come back after he, left us 4 years ago? I thought his conclusion was really good in that respect. It says, in conclusion, I was excited when a colleague forwarded your job posting. I would love to teach in a writing department again. So he went to a place where he wasn't in a writing department anymore. And we know that one of the things that's special about our department is we are a separate writing department, not an English department. That means a lot to us. And he's like pushing our buttons with that. And frankly, I am ready to come home and be among friends. And we're like, oh, and you'd be like, oh, is that corny? Should, you know, is it? No, we eat that stuff up. You know, we're all, you know, look, he's got all the beautiful credentials and he wants to come home and be among friends. And we're like, oh my God, we want you to come back too. And then he didn't. So, but he wrote a really, really persuasive letter. And again, notice that for both, he was our top candidate before he dropped out, and for the guy that we ultimately offered the job to, what they did was they did a great job of knowing that UALR is more teaching focused than research focused. And every place they talked about their research, they talked about how that informed their teaching. Now, again, if this were for a Research One institution where research and publication was the name of the game, I think both of those candidates would have written very different letters. But this really persuaded us that, you know, it reminded us of all the things that we had loved about him when he was here and made us feel like, wow, wouldn't it be great if we could get this guy to come back? All right, let's look at one more before we conclude. Again, we'll look at one of the short ones just for comparison. It's being a little laggy. Come on. There we go. Oh yeah, this one is only one page. Okay, so notice that while one guy directed it to the chair of the hiring committee, this person directed it to the chair of the department. Again, either way, it showed that those two people took the trouble to find out who was likely to be among the decision makers. And so I have to say, I'm kind of partial to this opening where she says, many of you know me as a past graduate and an adjunct, but I want you to see me as your next full-time rhetoric and writing instructor. And I'm like, yes, like that is the punchiest, most direct statement of how she, you know, to set up the rest of her argument that we've looked at yet. And then I love how you focused the rest of her letters. She says, your new instructor needs to have a variety of teaching experiences. And now she's going to show us how she has that. The second paragraph, your department needs someone who can advise students. And my years of, and then she talks about how good she is as an advisor. And I'm like, you're killing it. You're killing it. I'm like, want you so much. Then she shows us that she paid attention to the job description. Says the job description asks for attendance at professional conferences. Here are my conferences. And so notice that, you know, it would have been even more impressive actually if she had had a longer vita, because maybe we would have had trouble finding some of those things. And so now she's done a really good job of calling out the highlights. But even so, this active voice where she makes clear connections between the qualifications and what she knows we need, like that is a winner. And that is why she made it into the finalist pool, even though her letter and her vita were so much shorter than every other candidate's. All right, do you have then, so now you see kind of the range of possibilities. And you yourself will have to spend some time thinking about your strategy for doing your cover letter. And I want to say to all of you, including those of you who are watching this after the recording, that if you want to make an appointment to have me take a look at your materials before you start putting them out on the market, I'm happy to do that. I can't necessarily give you the same perspective as somebody within your own discipline, so you should definitely show it to somebody within your own discipline as well. But if you want my feedback on the writing or the organization or the document design, there are some things about my experience as a member of search committees that could probably be helpful to you. Do you have any questions then about anything we've talked about, whether it's about finding academic positions, organizing your CV, or putting together your cover letter and how to best use it?
I might take you up on that offer of, oops, sending you my stuff because I've already graduated and I've got all that stuff made. I'm trying to get positions as a professor, right?
Right.
So I've already had one interview where it lasted like 2 whole days. They make you teach, they make you present research, they
Yeah.
make you meet all the people. And then they hired the person with less experience than me. So I was so confused. So I'm
Right.
obviously doing something wrong.
Well, but you know what that says to me, Esther, is that the problem is not your CV or your cover letter, right? Because you got the interview. So,
Okay.
and that's something I said at the very beginning of the workshop.
I'm so sorry, I'm late.
Well, no, it's okay. But actually what you're saying is really valuable for people to hear, which is that where you get knocked out of the process tells you where the potential problem is. So if you were not getting interviews, for example, then I would say we should look at your CV and cover letter because they're not persuading people to invite you to the interviews. But if you're getting interviews and you're not getting the job offer, then probably something is going on in the interview process. And the hard thing is this is another thing I said earlier, but bears reiterating. You could still be amazing and still not get the job. Like it could be one weird, quirky thing about that other candidate, and you'll never know because you don't know what conversations they had about that candidate. You don't know what credentials that candidate, you don't know what that candidate did in his or her interview. So you can't kind of beat yourself up because you were the number 2 person and not the number 1 person. You had so much competition even to get to the point where you were asked to campus. So the fact that you got asked to campus and you got to do the big interview means you're doing some stuff really, really right.
Okay, now I don't feel so bad.
Yeah, no, you should not feel bad at all. And I was telling Rebecca, Seth, and Shantae that there have been many, many times when at the end of a search like that one, where we've gone to our dean and begged for the funding to hire both the people that were the finalists, and they never say yes, which always makes us sad because like there's always something of, like they're both wonderful people and we really actually want to be friends with them forever, but we also know that we're going to break somebody's heart by only getting to pick one. So they might have loved you tremendously and it might have broken their heart to have to pick the other person. So again, you should not say something's wrong with me unless it happens a lot.
Well, it only happened once so far.
So that's not at all. I mean, you should congratulate yourself and say, look, I did great, because out of probably a pool of anywhere from 25 to 50 people, you were the number 2. That's really good. And so I know it can be hard because you get your heart, you really want these jobs.
Yeah.
And like the story that I was just telling about, like the candidate we were in love with, who then dropped out of the search. And we were like it crushed us too. So like it doesn't always work out a happy ending for us either. And then the guy that we did hire from these group, like I said, he stayed with us for 2 years and then left us. And we'd had all these conversations about, oh, isn't it great that, he has this, he has the doctoral degree and he's connected to us from the past, so he'll probably stay. And we passed over, this is the thing that killed me. So the 2 other female candidates who made the top 3 when 2 of the other guys dropped out, they both had more teaching experience than the guy we hired. And we let the PhD background sucker us in over the teaching experience. And then we lost him anyway. So joke's on us. So who knows, so actually too, Esther, this is relevant for me to repeat too. So that doesn't, if you, for example, see that job at that place advertised again, you should totally reapply.
Oh,
Don't take the fact that you got turned down the first, like they would be saying, dang it, we should have taken her. Dang it. It's not like they don't want to see you again. They want to see you again.
Okay, thanks.
They wanted you enough to bring you that far and spend that much time with you. It's a very good sign.
Thank you so much.
You're
I feel
welcome.
a lot better now.
Yeah, no, I think you should. So I think you're probably doing the right things with your cover letter and CV, and only if you get if you don't get interviews, then you know that that's where the problem is. These are very good questions. Any other questions? I know I've kept you quite a bit yet tonight, so probably very tired and have homework to do.
I just have a comment. I just really appreciated seeing the wide variety of styles of documents.
Yes, I hope that's reassuring.
It is for
because-
sure.
Yeah, because it means that just like one little stylistic difference is not going to be the thing that keeps you from getting considered. But anything you do nice that makes it easier, like having attractive stuff, like I won't lie, as a search committee member, I'm super grateful for it. But do we expect it? Does it keep us from considering qualified people? Not one bit.
I like how you pointed out not to use a generic introduction, because I typically use the "to whom it may concern," and looking back on that, that's just reflection of laziness. So
Right. Well, I mean, again, it's if you make the effort to be more personal, I guarantee you committees always notice, and it always reflects well on you when you follow the social niceties and make that little extra effort to make it personal. They always love it. All right, with that kind of concludes the workshop. Doesn't kind of conclude it, it really concludes the workshop. I'm happy to take your questions if other questions occur to you after we're through tonight, and happy, like I said, to make individual appointments to work with you on your materials. Thank you very much for your time this evening.
Yeah, and thank you so much for presenting. And this is just a reminder to everyone, the GSA is putting on one more workshop for the semester. It's next Wednesday at 6 o'clock, and it's on interviewing skills. So it's a good follow-up to today's workshop. And this one will be recorded and posted to our website. That's ualr.edu/GSA.
Well, thank you very much, Rebecca.
Yeah, I'll be
have a-
watching the recording. So I go to the website for the recording?
Yeah, and
That's
it'll
exactly right.
specifically be under the events tab. So you'll see it on the sidebar. It's under events.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you very much. I feel a lot better again.
You're welcome. Have a good evening, everybody.
Bye.